Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful June the 22nd, 2020. Round of the Deportes, Big C. I know Big C went down to the Trump rally down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, so he's yet to call in. I just want to make sure he's doing fine and he did not get converted or proselytized, if that makes sense to you. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also Big C Sports, powered by Google and Alexa all around the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon and Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Also coming to Spotify, where you can follow Big C Sports very soon. Really appreciate that. So much is being said about our Veterans Crisis Hotline, but we always do the pause first, Big C. Want to make sure we pause, but never pause on the Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced in helping veterans and their loved ones get help. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can go online to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help. Just make the call. They do a great job. Also very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants. And when you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 100 real estate brokers to put their property listings on TV, just like your car dealerships are doing it, restaurants are doing it. Let TV work for your real estate. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. For those of you looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com, and you can get some help for that. Also, really just looking forward to a lot of good things coming. My goodness, it is really getting hot. It's getting hot in Northern California. A lot of things happening over this great country. But I also would be remiss. You know, I love the United States of America for what we can become. But again, I want to just offer prayers for, Bubba Wallace and his family. Because as a man of color, seeing and hearing about racial epithets, and people go, yeah, man, sorry that happened. Well, Nascar is doing a lot right now to undergo a renaissance for decency, if that makes sense to you. On Sunday, an incident at Talladega. I mean, everybody heard about it so far. It was late afternoon. NASCAR was made aware of a noose that was found in the garage stall of Bubba Watson. And he's the only full-time African-American racer that's running around for NASCAR, Richard Petty's team. And NASCAR released a statement that they're angry and outraged and cannot state strongly enough how serious they take this heinous act. They've launched an immediate investigation into what happened. They will do everything they can to identify the person or the persons responsible and eliminate them from the sport. As we've stated unequivocally, there is no place for racism in NASCAR, and this act only strengthens our resolve to make the sport open and welcoming to all people. And I know that the FBI and NASCAR investigating the noose found in the garage of an African-American, Bubba Wallace, the only full-time African-American driver, Talladega track in Alabama. it is a hate crime. And I hope for all the people who really don't believe that whoever put the noose around the garage, wherever they put it, I really ask for those people to turn yourselves in. And if you turn yourself in, then you can show all the people that believe just like you that you're brave. We talk about the land of the free and the home of the brave, Big C. Well, here's a chance for the person or the persons to show that you're brave. Don't run and hide. That's what cowards do, or guilty people. But we are in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Show that you're brave. Show that you're free. Turn yourself in. You had the malice of forethought to put a noose in everything that represents, and you did it with malice of forethought. You took the time. You didn't put it in the garage of every Caucasian driver. There's a lot of good white brethren that are standing up against hatred, and I really appreciate them, and I'm sure God does too, if that makes sense to you. But I really implore the people that put the noose in the garage of Bubba Wallace, African-American man, turn yourself in. Turn yourself in to law enforcement, issue an apology, and go through whatever hate crime prosecution you got to go through. Because you are brave, aren't you? Isn't that what brave people do? They turn themselves in. Well, turn yourself in. And all the people that were encouraging you to do it and telling you that you're going to get rid of that N word, or you're going to get rid of that whatever you call him, to try to break a man's spirit. You're not going to break his spirit. He has too much God in him. But at least show the people that are still flying around that Confederate flag that did lose the war, show them who you are. Be proud of your bigotry. Don't run from it. Turn yourself into law enforcement for the hate crime that you committed, and show all the other people who have children that believe just like you that your actions can lead to being prosecuted, not only by NASCAR and law enforcement, but by the FBI. So the next dumb person that wants to raise their child with enmity for other people, and show them how proud you are. Show them, if you think you did nothing wrong, turn yourself in. I think that would be the right thing to do. Just turn yourself in. That makes more sense. Make the phone call, turn yourself in, and show people that you have what we call the land of the free and the home of the brave. Show them you have that inside of you. Because if you're justified in taking the time to do that to another individual, why are you running? Why are you running and hiding when you can stand up? You probably stand up for the flag, the American flag, while you fly the Confederate flag. And for all the people that can't believe that they won't watch a sport if African Americans take a knee to the flag, well, I'm sure this person that put the noose in Bubba Watson's garage, he probably stands up for the flag too. And maybe he also has the Confederate flag and the American flag. The Star Spangled Banner, maybe he has the original, when he sings the stand up for the national anthem. Maybe he sings the original one produced by Francis Scott Key, even though it did not become an American anthem until 1931. It was written, I believe, in 1814 when we still had slavery and all the pain that caused. But it's just there's two things that I really appreciate. I appreciate the sound of thunder when they start the cars and they're racing around the racetracks. And I know Bubba Wallace is in contention today. I don't believe in giving out, whether someone won or not. People can tune in on their own. The race is already over by the time that we're on the air anyway, but still people want to DVR things. But I would just hope the person that put that noose in his garage, if you have children at home, put the noose around their necks too, since it's something you're proud of. If you have children or a spouse or anyone else that applauded you for doing that, go ahead and put the noose around their neck. If you think it's the right thing to do, why not do it to the people you love? If you're so brave, take your grandchildren, your children, your spouse, your parents, grandparents, all the people that applauded when you put that thing together, that noose, and put it around your grandchildren's neck and applaud it if it's decent. Isn't that what decent people do? Put it around the neck of the people that you love. and see if those people that encourage you to do it, see if they still clap. See if they still clap then. I hope that the FBI is serious when they want to bring them to justice. And when people say, why does Black Lives Matter? All lives matter. For all of you who say, when, all houses matter. Every house matters. But when a house is burning down, the best time to call the fire department is before it burns down, not after it's burned down. Well, a lot of people feel that based on laws, and if you go back and sing the Star Spangled Banner, sing the original one. When you get mad when Black Americans don't want to stand for it and they want to take a knee. Imagine when you listen to the original words of the Star Spangled Banner for all of our sports games, whether people stand or not, that's their choice. But imagine every time Francis Scott Key used the N-word, and when he talked about death and dying and being in the grave, imagine every time that Francis Scott Key used the N-word, imagine he put a little white child name instead. Imagine he mentioned your grandchild, or your children, or your parents, your brothers and sisters, your nieces and nephews. Imagine they were white when he's saying that they have no better thing than to be in the grave, and that they should never have justice. And you want to say you don't want to watch a game when people are well read and they understand that, and they don't want to go along with that self-hatred. But again, everybody can have their own choice. But just imagine whenever you put the N-word in a Francis Scott Key, imagine he said little white child, little white kid. And then tell me if you're going to stand for that. It's not for dumb people, because a lot of dumb people just get upset. But if you're well read, read it. And replace the N-word with your white children and grandchildren. And then tell me, like Drew Brees before he got educated, if you will not go along with somebody who's... If you replace the original version of the national anthem Francis Scott Key put together, and you put Drew Brees' little children in there every time he mentioned the word N-word, do it. And then tell me your feelings of the national anthem. But I really hope that person has the freedom and the bravery to turn himself in. It's all fair in love and war. I also want to go... I know Big C went to the Tulsa. We just celebrated Juneteenth. It was for June 19th, the day that slaves were freed in Texas. It was 1865, June 19, 1865, when they found out. But believe this if you want to. There was a song called Ripley's Believe It or Not. And you got to believe it. It's amazing that this news was in a locker room of a race car driver, and none of the white guys got the news. When people say, all lives matter, well, not all the white drivers had a noose put in their garage. It was only one, African American. But when you get upset, read the original version of the national anthem. Every time you see the word Negro, replace it with a white grandchild or white children, and see if you really still stand for that. Your choice, but just do it. It's an experiment. Do it. The Trump administration is amazing. They love sports, but he has a son by the name of Eric Trump. Donald's son, animal-looking son. He calls protesters animals at the Trump rally. And here's his wife standing next to him, clapping with her bleached out hair. That's not real either. Trying to be like the Whig Society. But his wife was clapping. And at the Tulsa rally, when his dad said, those criminals are out there protesting. I'm speaking to white Americans, because if you identify yourself as a criminal, he's talking to you. You're the majority of group that were there. There were people of all colors, I guess. But when he calls people animals, is he talking about his father? Maybe he's talking about his mother. Because they were protesting the protesters. And was he talking about his father's new wife, his stepmother? When he said animals are out protesting? Because if he's looking at the man in the mirror and he's mad at the protesters, isn't he protesting? So maybe he was talking about himself when he said those protester animals that are protesting and looting and burning down churches. That came from Eric Trump, the father or the son of Donald Trump. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And if that's what people... I mean, the rally had about 6,000 people in it, according to the police department or the fire department. POTUS tried to say it had more. Don't believe what you see with your eyes. But I was embarrassed for POTUS because he stood on the podium for the most part. He never really took his hands off of it other than for a few seconds. He also tried to show that he could drink a glass of water, and if you notice, he could barely get it up to his mouth. He tried it twice and he threw the cup away because he didn't want to fail the third time. He never really drank the water. He got it on his lips. Something's wrong with POTUS, and I hope his medical doctors look at him. But Eric Trump, he refers to racial justice protesters as animals in the Tulsa rally. And we wonder how the vitriol got started for someone to put a noose in the garage of a NASCAR racer, Bubba Wallace. I really appreciate how a lot of the white brethren did the decent thing, and they put their arms around him, because they have white children too. And for people that may not know this, in about the next 30 years, white Americans will be the minority population in the United States. And you don't want your grandchildren to face the same kind of hatred and vitriol that people of color have faced. It's amazing that people just want justice and not revenge. Because if people want revenge, what kind of trap are you setting for your grandchildren in the future? You may not even be around, but they'll be around. It's great that people are looking for justice and not revenge when you think about that. So Eric Trump, when he says those animals that are protesting, I wonder who he's talking about. Maybe he's referring to himself or his wife or whoever he's referring to. Most of the people out there that I saw are Caucasian, and he's asking you guys to vote for him. It's all fair in love and war. They love sports. But I really want to tie this in, because we live in a great country. You can agree and disagree, and you can still be American. Isn't that amazing? NASCAR racing legend Richard Petty, he showed his support for Bubba Wallace, and he shouted down racism like a thunderstorm. He shouted it down. He didn't stand up like a lot of people grew up in households where they heard a parent, a grandparent, an aunt or uncle, a brother or sister speak that venom, that bigotry, that hatred. But they were so low life in doing it, they wouldn't even do it in public. It was always a secret, always hidden. Why is it always hidden? If you're proud of something, James Brown used to say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. James Brown sang that song all the time. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Say it loud, I'm white and I'm proud. Say it loud, I'm Native American and I'm proud. Whatever it is, you're proud of who you are. I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm a child, whatever it is, be proud of who you are. But I really appreciate Richard Petty. I grew up watching Richard Petty, the number 43 race car. I used to get up in the mornings, and when I was a little boy, I would watch Richard Petty. I never saw black Americans, but I had some of my athletes, my heroes, my role models, they were white men. I watched Richard Petty the same way I watched Terry Bradshaw. I watched them the same way I watched Pete Rose growing up. I saw the same stuff. You know, I just remember as a kid, we were taught to treat people the way you want to be treated. So Richard Petty attends Talladega today, support of Bubba Wallace. The icon, he attends today NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega Super Speedway to stand in solidarity with Bubba Wallace. And there are so many people, our white brethren, that I've been calling for a long time. I ask for all of our brethren, black and white, red, brown, yellow, male, female. If we just stand up for what's right, then our society will get a lot better a lot sooner. Richard Petty decided to travel to Alabama Super Speedway after the noose was found in Bubba Wallace's garage stall on Sunday. And he said the most important thing for him right now is hugging his driver. He drives Richard Petty's car. One's black, one's white. People have to see that. At some point in time, we're all just people. We all come from the African continent. We're all just people. Richard Petty later issued a statement on Twitter condemning the racist act. And for people who grew up in a household where they were taught that garbage by someone who was a lowlife, could have been a parent, a grandparent, a brother or sister, you know who they are. If you're proud of it, say it out loud. Say it into the public. The race was postponed on Sunday because of the inclement weather. And it marked the first race that Richard Petty, he's 82 years old, that he's attended since the sport was shut down because of COVID-19, because of the pandemic. You think about that. Bubba Wallace who's African American, drives the number 43 Chevrolet for Richard Petty Motorsports. Wallace said in a statement Sunday that he was incredibly saddened by the act. Anyone can apologize, and anyone can say, forgive me. And I think if they do enough of that, then people can realize that everybody has a chance to be forgiven. That's what I believe in. So there, the authorities said that the FBI is investigating the discovery of the noose, and the governor of Alabama condemned the racist act against Wallace, who is NASCAR's only full-time African-American driver. And I think the future generation, a lot of young people, they really believe in equality and liberty and justice for all. And to me, in my opinion, that's what's going to make everything better. It's not going to be people in dividing. More people are coming together and believing in equality. And that's the only thing, in my opinion, that can make the world a better place. It all can begin with people just having the chance to see each other as the same, being decent toward each other and not running away from everybody who looks a little bit different. So I believe that to me makes my heart happy. And to have people no longer standing behind the closed curtain and saying nothing, there are people now who are at least holding their head up high, saying that they believe or don't believe in something. I really hope the people who left the noose in the garage of Bubba Wallace, I hope they'll turn themselves in and show the people that believe in them how brave they are. I mean, if you're doing the right thing, nothing's going to happen to you. There's no place for disgusting display of hatred in our state, and the governor of Alabama said, and I hope the same sentiments are said when it's time to vote, and that there's no voter obstruction, and do everything you can to make people who obstruct voting, that should be a federal crime. Obstructing the vote should be a federal hate crime to American citizens. That's my opinion. So the governor of Alabama apologized to Bubba Wallace, as well as to his family and friends, for the hurt that this has caused and the regret that this mark leaves on our state. And again, I just ask any person, no matter who you are, if you believe the person that planted the noose was right, if you believe in whatever they believe in, and these conversations happen in private, in the dark, not in public. You do it with people that are dumb enough to believe like you. Every time you want to use the N-word, just replace it with young white child, your white grandchildren or children, or your grandparents, or your mother and father. Think about that. And if you still think it's okay, then that's your choice. But I really believe that all Americans, as long as we live in this world together, we got to grow together and share pains together. Joy and pain, like Frankie Beverly said, joy and pain like sunshine and rain. I also want to go over to the ESPYs. They put on a nice show. I know it's a little bit different. We didn't have the red carpet and people all decked out in Hollywood. A lot of what everybody's doing online now. So the ESPYs, Malcolm Jenkins put together a Black Lives Matter video. Had a lot of great athletes in it, from Lindsey Vonn to Steve Kerr. There's Russell Wilson, many others. They share the same thoughts that Big C Sports shares, our message on equality. We do it every day. We've been doing it ever since we started our show back in 5 years ago. And I really appreciate it that Hollywood is actually standing up and helping out with the people who are athletes. Because if we don't do it, then no other generation is going to do it. That's what I believe, that God gave us all a platform. We got to use it. It's a powerful message that we all got to do it. We stand up for women. We stand up for everybody. So amid a nation of reckoning over police brutality, systemic racism, in the wake of George Floyd's killings, the murders, think about it. The ESPYs, an award show, a voice in sports to capture this singular moment in our culture. New Orleans Saints safety Malcolm Jenkins, who spent the last few years lobbying national and state lawmakers, which is really where this yellow brick road has to end with lawmakers. We can march all we want, but if you can't sign a bill into law, then we're just marching. It takes both, but nothing happens until the ink touches the pen. I'm going to talk about my solution, and I think people need to Google U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee and the Black Marshall Plan, because especially with all the things that are going on now, if we did it for Germany and Western Europe, we can do it for African Americans. It helps all people. But you think about it. The last few years, Malcolm Jenkins spent lobbying the national and state lawmakers for criminal justice reform, whose tearful reaction to teammate Drew Brees' comments equating kneeling during the national anthem to disrespecting the flag in our country captured the raw feelings of millions of Americans immediately came to mind. And as I always ask people, Google the truth, Google whatever we say, Google everything that anybody says, because the truth will set us all free. You got to Google it. If you just think about it, when you Google the Star Spangled Banner, Francis Scott Key original version, and I asked Drew Brees to do this too, whether he's done it or not, and he's come back and apologized because he didn't understand it. But think about it. When Drew Brees had said, and he's a good man. He's a good man. That's why I said, you know what? I didn't see it from the other man's point of view. For any white American, black American too, when you get mad at people and Trump says, fire the SOBs who don't stand for the flag. You stand if you want to, that's your choice. But at least Google the original version by Francis Scott Key that is so egregious they even took it out. They took it out and they left in the parts that they could get away with. But it was anti-black Americans. And every time you see the N-word using it, replace it with your white children and grandchildren. And then see if you still want to stand up for it. And if you can't stand for people who refuse to stand against it. I'm not saying stand for it or don't stand for it. But at least don't be ignorant. If you can take the words that he put in there about people of color, black American, what he calls slaves, and replace that with white children, your own, your grandchildren, and you can still stomach it, that's your choice. But it's an experiment. You could do it around the dinner table tonight and see if you still have the same respect for it. So we ask ourselves whose voice might resonate most in a show set to air such a crucial moment in our national discourse over racial equality and police brutality and systemic racism, the criminal justice system. There's a lot of things that need to be done. But what I'm really emboldened by are people talking. It was after, we're talking to the media. We're part of media too. And we're asking, listen up, media. The opportunity to serve as creative force behind a powerful piece after the 2016 death of 2 unarmed black men at the hands of police. There's a lot of good officers. We're talking about the bad ones. And they would be wise to change their ways so we can help the good ones. There's always good and bad in everything. But we can't have people who are sworn to protect and serve the public being bad. It's not good. It's not good at all. We can't do that. There's so many players that are doing their part, but they're not lawmakers. I appreciate the 2016 SB segment with LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, and Dwayne Wade. They spoke out against police violence, and it inspired them to act, but they're not sworn to protect and serve, and they're not lawmakers. I just hope that we can get behind Sheila Jackson Lee with the Marshall Plan that she's always advised and answered. Already advised. It's been in front of Congress for 2 years now, and I hope that they can do that. That, to me, it makes more sense as we want to find a way to form a more perfect union. I'm going to take what's called the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. I'll be back in just a moment. We'll talk more about sports and how we can make a more perfect union. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. Coming soon, Google to Spotify as Big C Sports. Really appreciate that, and I really appreciate opportunities with Big C Sports. I know Big C Sports went down to the Trump rally, and I just want to make sure that when Eric Trump said that those animals are out protesting, I'm sure he was talking about the man in the mirror, or maybe his wife standing next to him, because he was protesting the protesters. So maybe he was saying that to his wife and she just didn't get it as she was bleaching her hair to be more like the Whig Society. But it's all fair and love and war. People do what they got to do. But I think when we talk about athletes taking a stand, what can they really do? My opinion, Juneteenth was a great weekend, great celebration. I will share my thoughts on what a solution is. The best advice to succeed: follow U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee proposed Marshall Plan. Truman used it in 1948 to rebuild Germany and Western Europe. Surely it can be used to rebuild African Americans too. The GI Bill was not for African Americans. It was anti-black. Harry Truman, give them hell, Harry. I didn't mean to do it to African Americans, Harry. They helped you with the war. So after, Europe after World War II, what is the Marshall Plan, also known as the European Recovery Program? You can call it the African American Recovery Program. It's worth a thunderous sound, Big C. The Marshall Plan, also known as the European Recovery Program that no one complained about, it was a United States-sponsored program providing aid to Western Europe following the devastation of World War II. It was enacted in 1948 and provided help in the billions of dollars to help finance rebuilding efforts on the continent. The brainchild of U.S. Secretary of State George C. Marshall, for whom it was named, it was crafted as a 4-year plan to reconstruct cities, industries, and infrastructure heavily damaged during the war, and to remove trade barriers between European neighbors, as well as foster commerce between those countries and the United States. In addition to economic redevelopment, one of the stated goals of the Marshall Plan was to halt the spread of communism on the European continent. Well, can we halt the spread of racism on the American continent and pay the reparations? Think about it. When reparations was never given to African Americans from 1619 to 2020. Okay? Never. But the plan is there in Congress. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee out of Texas. Google who she is and see if we can put our energy behind her. So when we ask for a sports team to stand up, or sports owners, Big C, and we want for athletes to stand up, we have to use our people in Congress. We got to vote. We got to encourage people to get out and vote. You're probably better off if you use your mail-in ballots, because there's some words that they may try to obstruct the vote to. Remember, Eric Trump said those animals that are out there protesting, you know what you do to animals? You lock them up, right? Whoever thought about the kids that were corralled by the POTUS administration that came from Mexico? Has anybody heard where they are? Are they still locked up? Isn't it easy to lock somebody up when you consider them an animal? But I still say he was talking to his wife, because she was the one there on the stand. And she was protesting the protesters. So when he said those protesters are animals, was he talking about his wife? And she was dumb enough to clap. I mean, she's clapping as he's calling her an animal, Big C. And if she didn't dye her hair, she would have the roots of the color of most of the people that were out there marching too. I mean, sometimes you got to be careful when you're not sleeping with the enemy. If your husband says you're an animal and you're sitting there clapping because you think he's talking about somebody else, you might want to watch his speech twice. But anyway, I would just hope that we can use the Marshall Plan. It worked in Europe with American taxpayer dollars. It can work in the United States, and no one complained for the liberty and justice for all that we all need. I know we love sports. If Democrats control the 13 former Confederate states where they want to fly that Confederate flag, if they can control the 13 former Confederate states, they control 170 of the 270 electoral votes to become the President of the United States of America. They will control 33% of the House and 26 members of the Senate. They will need only 25 states of the other 37 states that makes up 50. Think about it. They will need only 20% of the other 37 states to control the House and Congress, and mail-in ballots are a must. So I just implore people to do that. We love what we're doing in the world of sports, and we love what we're doing in the world of having people pay attention to politics, pay attention to what's going on in our world. I want to just talk about something that I think is important. Her name is Dawn Ostroff. She's the Chief Content and Advertising Business Officer of Spotify. For people that wonder about podcasts, how many people you guys have listening to you, Charlton? How many people follow the Big C Sports? Well, it's all over the world. I can tell you that I got a document from iHeartRadio of the many platforms we're on, and we're in the top 1%, in the top 100 downloads on the iHeartRadio out of 250,000. That's in the top 1%. In fact, it's in the top third of 1% when you look at 250,000, and we're in the top 100. That's impressive. So why do I bring up this lady's name? Because I love talking about sports. I really wanted to pay homage to Richard Petty and Bubba Wallace and NASCAR. NASCAR has stood behind, and they put their face on it, around Black Lives Matter more than Jerry Jones, more than the NFL, and maybe more than the NBA, because not all the owners of NBA and NFL have come out and said anything. They've been silent. But Don Ostroff, Chief Content and Advertising Business Officer of Spotify. And I'm proud of anybody who succeeds. And this is why I say the whole universe is following Big C Sports, copying our style. Everybody's talking sports and politics now. You didn't hear that about 4 years ago when we started 5 years ago. You really didn't hear it even 3 years ago. You started to, but we do it like nobody else, and I'm just saying it's true. You can Google it. Spotify signed Joe Rogan podcast to $100 million. I'll say it again. Spotify signed Joe Rogan's podcast to $100 million starting in September of 2020. And as I mentioned, Ms. Ostroff, Chief Content Advertising Officer for Spotify, Big C Sports Podcast is your next for $100 million too. You know, like the Me Too movement, we do it too. I follow Joe Rogan's podcast also. He's been out there in the world of MMA, and he's been out there and interviewing fighters, etc. Does a fine job. But I say our content is a lot better than his and a lot more realistic. I'm not knocking anything. I'm just saying Google it. We don't use profanity on our program. He does, so even children can hear it, and he knows it's true. We talk about things that affect everybody's lives, whether it's sports, politics, and he doesn't do the politics as much as he does the sports, but he's doing more politics now. I wonder where he got that from. He's been at it for 11 years. We've been at it 5. But if he can get $100 million on a contract starting in September of 2020, you know, my birthday's September 2020. I believe that I'm speaking into existence. The Bible, the book of James, the Bible says you have not because you ask not. Well, I'm asking. For people that wonder how much money is made in podcasts, $100 million. Google it. I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal, but she was on CNN. $100 million. And Big C Sports has more content than Joe Rogan. You can Google that. When you hear Big C Sports content, you're going to hear about the Constitution. You're going to hear about sports. You're going to hear about the Negro Leagues. You're going to hear about many African Americans in sports that you don't hear about on mainstream. That's crossing the pond. That's encouraging more people to realize they were all in the same pot together. The Middle Passage that brought slaves to the United States. We talk about that. We also talk about the diaspora of African Americans that spread all over the world. That's important. But when you think about it, we're in the top 1% of podcasts on iHeartRadio podcast, which has a lot more people than Spotify. And I'm talking to, like they say, you have not because you ask not. I'm already reaching out to Chief Content and Advertising Business Officer on Spotify, Don Ostroff. I want you to compare a Big C Sports podcast over the last 5 years to Joe Rogan, what he's doing, and you'll realize we do the same thing, but everything we do, we ask you to Google and verify. It's so important. $100 million for Big C Sports in our next advertising package. And people don't believe it? Google it. Google Joe Rogan, what podcast has been doing in this country, and it's just reported by the Washington, I believe it's the Washington Journal, the Washington Post. Beg your pardon, it was in the Washington Post. And so Spotify wants to become the go-to for podcast creators and audiences. It's important. Think about this. I want to say this so bad because as I taught the books to Big C about the world of podcast and what we're doing with podcasts, we took Salem Media in our time slot, our sports show, to #1 in the country. I still have the letter from the sales manager. That was in 2015. We were only on 1 day a week. Now we're in the top 1% of podcasts on iHeartRadio. Documentation beats conversation. But if a guy can come along and not even cover the content that we cover, and they give him $100 million, then I'm saying Big C Sports is next. Just Google the content. So podcasters are a lovely corner of the new media, a land where the human voices rules, and magically these days, it's easier to relax and harder to get angry. The audiences seem to be happier. The communities are stronger. Podcasts are the way they are distributed and extremely simple. Technology, indeed. The RSS feed protocol that connects podcast apps to audio files. And they need to be really simple in syndication. Big C Sports has been doing that. 37% of U.S. adults and teens now listen to podcasts monthly. The industry remains relatively tiny as a business with about 1 million podcasters. In fact, About 1 million. But $1 billion in annual ad sales. It's real. When I say welcome to the show, and you can hear our sponsors all over the world, that's what Big C Sports is doing. And so Spotify is coming onto the scene, and you're paying out $100 million. I just ask you, if you want to have the best content, you want people to compete for it, and that's why I'm asking with Spotify, and I'll be sending you information, Chief Content and Advertising Business Officer, Don Ostroff. I know you did something from Michelle Obama and President Barack Obama, and that's wonderful. And Big C Sports is next on your content, so I really look forward to that. I also want to make sure what you find on Big C Sports that you may not find in other sports programs is this was just out today. We've been talking about this for 5 years. Colleges. There's a College Coaches Coalition suggesting that black history get taught in high schools and colleges. And Big C Sports is saying, I'm going to go deeper than that. Just like a thunderstorm makes a lot of noise, I want to go deeper. I think black history should be taught from elementary school all the way through college courses. I think Nascar is teaching you about black history now. A lot of people, my white American brethren, didn't even know what Juneteenth was. I'm talking about people with a degree from college. They didn't even know what it was. Like, why not? All they heard was that black Americans were slaves and Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream and we all set free now. Well, if you go back and Google the Moors, they ruled northern Africa in Europe for about 1,400 years before slavery came in the Middle Passages. Those are black men and women that did that. So we come from a proud history. All life, according to Dr. Leakey and Gregory Mendel, came out of Africa, out of the womb of a black woman. That's science. That's genetics. Dr. Leakey, the origin, went looking for the origin of man. Studied Europe first. Didn't stay there. He opined that all life came from Africa. Dr. Gregory Mendel. This is over a 100-year study. Gregory Mendel. He opined that the dark gene is dominant, the light gene is recessive, that the dark gene can reproduce the light gene, and the light gene cannot reproduce the recessive gene. That's Mendel. That's science. So if you understand that, you'll realize that we're all the same tribe. We just have different skin pigment in our skin. Kansas City, Missouri, there's a new committee formed by the National Association of Basketball Coaches to address racism. Think about it. And diversity. Recommended Monday that high schools and colleges establish required courses on black history for graduation. And if other people knew the proud history of African Americans that Ancestry.com doesn't even cover, because it doesn't tell you that all life came from the African continent, then maybe they wouldn't feel so early to put a noose around someone's locker room or someone's garage. It's really repulsive. Maybe if Eric Trump understood that all life came from Africa and that he has the recessive gene of the dominant gene, he and his wife, he would understand when he says animals, he's referring to himself. We all came from the same source. How could the president's son call his constituents animals and people want to vote for his father? It doesn't make any sense to me. But again, POTUS' father in 1927 was also arrested at a KKK rally in New York City. You can Google that too. The proposal is the first to come from the Committee on Racial Reconciliation since it was established in response to the death in Minneapolis resident George Floyd and other race-related incidents in America. Throughout the committee's initial discussion and immediate observation was the overall lack of awareness of history and issues facing the African-American community. Think about that. This was said by committee chairman South Carolina coach Frank Martin and Harvard coach Tommy Amaker. It is our country. If our country is indeed going to make the necessary strides towards combating racism and injustice, the topic must become a core component of every American's educational experience. There's no way you can insult a person of African descent without insulting your own ancestry. People got to know that. But even if our churches, Jesus Christ, according to the Bible, I know it was rewritten in 1519, but it was by King George, who called him a king anyway. But Revelations chapter 1 verses 14 and 15, the book of Daniel chapter 7 verse 9 and 10 and 6, and the book of Colossians, it said Christ had the dominant gene. Christ had skin the color of brass and hair like lamb's wool. That's not white. That's not pale. So even our churches, our theologians, our popes, our bishops, if you're honest about helping eradicate racism, whenever you have a picture of a white Jesus in your church, whenever you have that picture, please put the caption in the Bible where it describes him as being pale, because it does not exist. That's a lie. And when we keep shedding lies, then people can grow up with a superiority complex that is based on a fallacy. It means it's not true. So if you really want to fix things, you got to fix it with the church, religion. You got to fix it with politics in our political climate. The Senate, the House, and Congress signed by the president. In Google U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee. It's so important. I don't want to just read your scores. You're not going to get this on the Joe Rogan Show, Spotify. I know you're giving him $100 million. There's nothing wrong with that. But if he can get $100 million, we should get $200 million, Big C. Just listen to both programs and tell me which one gives you more knowledge. Think about it. We don't have to have an athlete on and be a sycophant to that athlete. I'm not knocking anybody. Everybody has their own style. But there's some things that need to be addressed in our society, and Big C Sports has been doing it for 5 years. You think about Martin, his parents fled Cuba and settled in Florida, doing a webinar that he hopes the committee is able to address issues on racial injustice, not only within colleges and athletics, but in society in general. We're at a seminal moment in our life right now where people are talking about it. I think we do need the clergy. I was calling for 1 million pastors at the beginning of the year to pray for a solution to COVID-19. And I'm hoping we'll find that solution. But I believe that if we just Google what's real, you'll find that Big C Sports has been touching on a lot of this stuff for a long time. NFL news, Dallas Cowboys superstar quarterback Dak Prescott, he's finally come to his senses, Big C. He realized that $31,400,000 is a lot of money. He signed that deal, franchise tag him. You can readjust it next year, whatever happens. But it's a $31.4 million exclusive franchise tender today. And the two sides still have until July 15th to work out a long-term deal. But the Cowboys had placed their franchise tag on Prescott March 18th. By signing his franchise tender, Dak Prescott will become contractually obligated to report to training camp on time. Whether or not he and the Cowboys can figure out a long-term deal, Dak Prescott's decision to sign the franchise tender is not an indication that a long-term agreement is close. But at the same time, who could turn down $31 million? I mean, go ahead and sign the contract. You can always negotiate more coming up. I mean, life is about asking for what you want. There's no way you can get anything in life without asking for it unless it just falls on your head like a lightning bolt, Big C. But no one's asking for that. In the offseason, the Cowboys made a long-term offer to Prescott that would put him among the highest-paid quarterbacks in the NFL. And you think about this, Seattle's Russell Wilson is the highest paid at $35 million per season, followed by Big Ben Roethlisberger, who did not even play last year. I think he played just about a game before he injured his elbow, and he still got the $35 million or $34 million. That's a lot of money, Big C. So Cowboys owner, who's been absent about Black Lives Matter, all the SB athletes were not absent about it. NASCAR's not absent about it, but Jerry Jones, one of the most dynamic speakers in the world, an oil man, he said nothing yet. Maybe he doesn't believe in it. Cowboys owner, general manager Jerry Jones, and executive vice president Stephen Jones have repeatedly expressed their belief that Prescott is the team's quarterback in the future and is capable of leading the team going forward. I think Dak Prescott, obviously, that man is in a good position with the Cowboys. I don't know how good the Cowboys will be this year, but when you got your quarterback locked up, that's a good thing. And I'm good. I'm sure that the Cowboys would be good with that. Major League Baseball, the New York Yankees and the New York Mets, they've said that they're going to have their spring training in New York. I know a lot of times teams go down to Florida, but the Yankees and the Mets decide if baseball resumes, they're going to train in New York, and the players will start the coronavirus delayed season. Governor Andrew Cuomo made the announcement Saturday, and the teams confirmed the decision, and he said he would like to see them in training if that happens. Everybody knows it's about who stays healthy, and no one wants to get the virus just because people want to see them play. And I know everybody has their own thoughts about that. So I hope that we can just trust in science even if we have to delay the season. Major League Baseball players projected 60-game season proposal because of COVID-19. I know Big C and I were talking about them going back and forth about whether it's 70 games or 50 games. But in New York, the executive board of the Major League Baseball Players Association, they rejected a proposed 60-game schedule by a 33-5 vote, daring Commissioner Rob Manfred to give a unilateral order in the regular season start to provoke what figures to be a lengthy and costly litigation of the impact of coronavirus on the sport. Well, we know the numbers that hit over 120,000 in the United States. My goodness, the thing that I'm looking at, if I can look at it, there have not been any fatalities for athletes as far as I know. I hope I'm not sounding ignorant, and I don't want to see any. But hopefully if there's some type of blood work that can be done to find an antibody, maybe that would help. We all know that everybody's looking for a solution. I mean, I really hope that we can find a way to make our society better. We all have to do that. Everybody's looking for hope, asking for prayers, and trusting science. The Webb Simpson chant is on. Webb Simpson, Webb Simpson, Webb Simpson. He wins the Heritage Golf Championship, the RBC Heritage Golf Championship just over the weekend. And it was kind of hard to watch at times because there's no fans out there. But he won the U.S. Open at Olympic Club in 2012, and the U.S. Open has been scheduled to end on Father's Day every year since 1976. But it was moved to September this year because of COVID-19 and that pandemic. We're trying to solve that. But when you think about it, Simpson also won on Mother's Day the Players' Championship in 2018. The RBC Heritage filled a spot on the schedule, and Simpson is now a father of 5, became a winner for the second time this year with the record score at Harbortown. You think about it, he didn't have much of a choice with low scores. There's a lot of low scores. He finished at 22 under, 262, breaking by 2 the tournament record set by Brian Gay back in 2009. So that good boy was picking it up and getting his driver was working, his putter was working. And so congratulations to Webb Simpson. He had all the golfers in his Webb, Big C, if that makes sense to you. But congratulations. I know it's tough to play golf when you don't have a lot of people out there cheering for you. And I really appreciate what's going on with the world of Big C Sports. PGA Golf Championships will not have fans. I think we've all gotten used to that. And we know that we had Nick Watney had tested positive for COVID-19 last week at that same tournament. He's in self-quarantine, getting his treatment. I hope he's going to be okay. But coming up also, the PGA Championship confirms that no fans at Harding Park. Brooks Koepka, he's going to be trying to become the first player to win the PGA Championship 3 straight times in stroke play, and there won't be anyone at Harding Park to cheer him on. The PGA of America confirmed today the first major is the most unusual. It won't have the spectators that makes golf exciting, especially when you're trying to get to birdie or you're trying to par from 20 feet out and it goes in the hole. Everybody loves that. The PGA Championship, originally scheduled for May 14th through 17th in beautiful San Francisco, is now set for August 6th through 9th and will be the first of 3 majors this year. The U.S. Open moved from June to September 17th to the 20th in New York, and the Masters moving to November, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and the British Open was canceled. So we know a lot of golfers are still trying to stay sharp. They're doing the best they can to make sure that no matter what happens with science, that they can still play at a top level, and I look forward to that. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all over the world on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. And coming to Spotify, a $100 million contract. Spotify offered Joe Rogan another sports podcast. I don't think his podcast is as on par with Big C Sports, but everybody has their own flavor of Kool-Aid. I like my coffee with cream and sugar. Some people just like it with the sugar. Others like it just plain. It's all fair in love and war. But $100 million is the new goal for a podcast. And as the women's movement said, Big C Sports says, me too. We're looking forward to that. You can follow us all over the world, and I really appreciate that. Also, as we look at the world that's going on today, I know a lot of people are having some real conversations about race, and we've had it about gender. Men have always supported the women's movement when it comes to gender equality. Or we have, when they wear pink, a lot of the men wear pink to support breast cancer awareness. And I'm telling men, get your colon checkups too. We all got to get our checkups. And I know everybody's doing their part to stay healthy. I'm sending prayers out to people that I love, that I've also, getting a tune-up, and you know who you are, and just keep getting your tune-ups. Everybody knows what they got to do. And I really appreciate it that everybody's talking now. It doesn't have to always be easy. I appreciate Richard Petty for what he did, hugging Bubba Wallace. Not only hugging him, but he's driving his car, okay? He puts his money where his mouth is. That's important, and everybody can do that. Doesn't matter what color you are. If you do the right thing, it shouldn't matter what color somebody is. And that's why the feds have launched an investigation after the noose found around the garage stall of an African-American NASCAR driver. And I know they took down the Confederate flags, and a lot of people don't like that because they're living in the past, but they lost the war. When the Super Bowl was crowned, they gave the Kansas City Chiefs a championship trophy. They didn't give it to the San Francisco 49ers. They gave it to the team that won. And I just want to make sure that people understand it takes dialogue, and we got to keep having dialogue. There's a suspect that was arrested after he sucker punched a Philadelphia Eagles football player, Dallas Goedert, and hopefully, that'll be taken care of in the court. But no one deserves the right to go hit anybody. I just appreciate that we all have the chance to form a more perfect union, and we can only do that if we start talking to each other. Brett Favre, NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre, he thinks that Colin Kaepernick will be lauded like a hero, as Pat Tillman, the late Pat Tillman, who played NFL football, lost his life in war. Kaepernick's done a lot. He's gone through a lot of pain, a lot of joy, pain, sunshine, and rain. And people that did not stand up for him several years ago, they're coming. They're coming. People might say, well, they're coming now because it's easy. Well, some people aren't coming. So I applaud anybody who has an epiphany. Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre thinks Colin Kaepernick will reach a hero status in football, similar to that of Pat Tillman. And he was asked whether or not he thinks Kaepernick has reached a stature as a figure such as Jackie Robinson or Muhammad Ali, and whether he belongs in the Hall of Fame based on his work on and off the field. And he says, I can only think of right off the top of my head, Pat Tillman's another guy who did something similar, and we regard him as a hero, Favre said. So I'd assume that hero status will be stamped with Colin Kaepernick as well. And I know everybody has their own opinion. But Colin Kaepernick, when you get mad that he took a knee, read the original version of Francis Scott Key. See what he said about African Americans. See what he said about them. Put it in writing. It was so egregious they took it out of the national anthem that became a national anthem for the United States in 1931. It was written, I believe, in 1814. But everybody can forgive. We can learn. We can believe that the next generation will do better than this generation. But we only get there by talking and discussing things. That's why my heart is happy, and I'm so empowered, as I tell Big C, because we're seeing people all over the world that are starting to talk about what it takes to create equality for everybody. We know we can do it. We just got to talk about it. If we don't talk about it, then no one talks about it. More football players have tested positive for COVID-19, whether it's at Clemson, there's been some at Kansas State, also other schools. We've heard about Texas last week. We talked about Texas University. A lot of players tested positive for COVID-19, and everybody has their own thoughts about how we go forward with COVID and keeping players safe. We don't want to have anyone get ill, especially when you take it back home to people that are older or people that may be compromised. We don't want to have anything bad happen to them. So the best we can do is listen to science. I know even if you look at the White House right now, there were 2 Secret Servicemen that tested positive for COVID-19 on President Trump's staff. And he told them not to wear a mask, and now they have COVID-19. And if you think that's okay, then take your children and grandchildren out there too and see if they stay safe. I want to close with this. I love sports, and I love this great country. We the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. No, it wasn't perfect back then when it was written, but there have been many amendments added to it that have made this a more perfect union. And all we got to do is keep fighting and keep talking and keep putting yourself in the other man's shoes, and we shall overcome. I do have that dream. And as I always tell Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe? And I would say, in speaking for you, Big C, I appreciate when all of our brethren, men and women, black, white, yellow, brown, red, whatever it is, when we sit down and listen to the other man's point of view. We all say we believe in God, but not everybody does. Some people are atheists, some are agnostic. But one thing we can all believe in is that we should all have liberty and justice for all. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. Coming to Spotify soon, $100 million, Big C. You can follow us, and we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.